All right. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I know it's a little bit on the early side, but we appreciate everyone showing up for this. So this is a pretty interesting development, I think, Jennifer. So thank you for being here to talk about it. So let's just get into it. So you have two futures contracts launching on September 23rd, right? Can you just tell us about them, about what you're doing?
Yes, so it's on?
Yeah.
There we go. So we have two futures contracts that are coming. We have a physically delivered monthly Bitcoin contract that is physically delivered, and then we have a daily one as well. We talked to the market quite a bit to try to understand what they wanted and what they're looking for in having a futures contract, and a lot to talking to institutional investors. So for us, when we went out to everyone, it was talking to the large financial institutions, asset managers, hedge funds, and a lot of them wanted to have something that they could be able to use that was sort of infrastructure or institutional grade infrastructure. So we've taken a contract that similar to what we already do, cotton, sugar, cocoa, and we've just have Bitcoin. So it's physically delivered into a warehouse that we also co-own as well.
Okay, great. So you mentioned you're working with institutions on it, but is it mostly institutional customers you're seeing demand from, or are there some retail?
So we have actually a big mix, more retail than we expected. When we made the announcement for the launch a couple of weeks ago, I guess about 6-7 weeks ago, in the first couple of days we got about 50 to 60 emails every day from retail trying to get into this market. And as we get closer to the launch, it's retail asset managers, hedge funds, some financial institutions, a lot of high-frequency traders. We have a lot of crypto-only funds, crypto firms, and certainly a lot of crypto funds who are regulated now. So I found a lot of them need to only invest in regulated contracts. So for them, they need to have something that they trust, that's secure, and also that their shareholders are happy with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so also, I guess it'll be traded 5 days a week, right? And there will be...
Yes, so ICE, or the typical exchanges, CME, ICE, CBOE, we trade 5 days a week, 22 hours a day. So it usually opens Asia time around 7 a.m. and then it closes Asia time Saturday morning. So it doesn't hit the whole 24/7. We'll look to be able to expand that over time, but for launch, we're being relatively conservative on this, and we're just going to focus on the 5 days. And we've gotten mixed reviews on that. To be honest, we've gotten a lot of guys trading crypto that all they want to do is be able to trade it 24/7. They worry about the risk on Saturday and Sunday if they can't actually trade the product on ICE. But then we have a lot of firms that say, please do not open on Saturday and Sunday. We don't want to work. And in many ways, to be honest, it's probably more the traditional users. So, and we do have a slight, because we are collecting all of our margin in US dollars, we have to deal with the US banks. So when clearers have to collect margin and when we close out the books, it usually happens about 7 p.m. New York time, which means we can't do wire transactions at that time. So even delivery is a little bit delayed compared to what people are looking for.
Yeah, but you said there are also some benefits to that too, right? In terms of not having it be all the time.
Oh yeah, so Joanna and I were talking earlier, so she's very good at prompting me on this. So one of the things that when we're looking at our technology, it's always very important that we bring the technology down, usually on a scheduled time, 1 hour a day. And so that's why we're open 22 hours, to make sure that we can do any patches that we have to make sure that there's no problems. When I talk to some of the crypto traders now, a lot of the complaints that they tend to have, they find that the APIs don't work so well, or when the market is really moving, they can't get into the exchange that they're trading on, they can't sell what they want, they can't buy what they want. So ICE doesn't go down. And if there is, we're exposed in a different way than some of the unregulated exchanges are going to be exposed. So I don't know if any of you saw last week, Hong Kong Exchange came down and that hits the newspaper. The New York Stock Exchange, and Joanna you had reported on this in 2011, I think 2014, that had come down, so that hits the newspapers. So when another exchange, a crypto exchange, goes down, that's not the front page of the Financial Times. So we have to be very careful about making sure it's always available. So what I've said to a lot of the crypto guys is even if you are vaguely uncomfortable about trading on ICE or you're not quite sure about it, you can get an account and you know that when the market's moving and you can't get into the exchange that you're usually trading on, you can always come to us and be able to at least hedge your exposure that you have.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about how the settlement's going to work?
So we have physical delivery. So what that means is if we look back on it, we have a monthly contract. It settles on the third Wednesday of a month. And then we have T+2 delivery. So a participant will work directly with the backed warehouse. They will either put Bitcoin in if they're going to go short and they're trying to sell the Bitcoin, or if they're going long, they just have a warehouse account that's open. If you've gone long, if you hold your position until that third Wednesday, it means that you will have Bitcoin in your warehouse account in T+2, so that Friday. If you're selling, you have to have the Bitcoin in that account, and if your Bitcoin's not in the account, your clear will usually close down your position. But the Bitcoin will be in the account. We freeze it to make sure it doesn't come out so that it gets delivered to the counterparty 2 days later. The one other thing to mention that a lot of clients have asked me is, how does that work on the blockchain and when does it come out? For ICE, when we're doing it, all of this happens off the blockchain and it's simply ledger transactions. So until someone's moving the Bitcoin out of the warehouse, that's the only time that it starts to enter the blockchain after that.
Okay. And do you envision the product evolving over time? And if so, what are some of the ways it might?
Yeah, I think people sort of forget that on sort of futures contracts, a lot of them are very long-lived. So I started my life at the NYMEX, and so they had the WTI oil contract, which started in the early 70s. And I remember talking to one of the guys on the floor at the time, and he had been working for Shell before that. And his boss said, whoever wants to trade futures on oil, that's never going to happen. And what the contract looked like when it was launched and how it looks now is different. It's the same with our Brent contract. That's been trading since the 70s. How that looks now, it continues to evolve over time. And our expectation is I guess our goal with this Bitcoin contract is for it to be a benchmark. So ICE has a benchmark for Brent, so global oil, for cotton, for sugar, for orange juice, and we see that Bitcoin and our contract can be the benchmark for Bitcoin. And it's a way that institutional investors can get in, the way that retail investors can get in. Anybody can get into this contract and is comfortable to be able to do that. So we see that there could be a way that we could potentially change the way the market works. We've chosen physical delivery to help avoid price manipulation, because a lot of people worry about some other contracts if the price gets manipulated. And we have very strong market surveillance and risk management. ICE Futures US, where the contract will be listed on, that's an exchange that used to be the New York Board of Trade, and it's been around since the 1800s. And ICE owns 12 exchanges and 6 clearinghouses globally. So for us, market supervision and market surveillance are two of the most important things that we have to be able to make sure that people can trust the number, that it's credible, and that they're happy with what they're getting.
Okay, so what's your big focus for day one in terms of the customers you have or whatever? Are you really looking at getting right from the very start?
We want people to trade. So I've been with a number of different contract launches, and none of it's easy. So we're on calls every night at the moment, making sure that the people who want to be able to trade have clearing members. So what's different from what we have now and how people are trading crypto now is you have to have an account with a clearing member. So just like if you're going to trade stocks and you have to go and you have to have an account and you have to pay margin, it's exactly the same thing for this futures contract. So a lot of it is either educating some firms or getting a clearing account, getting the technology set up, making sure that they can trade, making sure they know how to reach the contract, how to reach us. So it's a lot of, it's back and forth with all of them. So it's quite an exciting time. Stressful, but exciting.
Okay, so Cboe has already pulled back from their offerings. So did you take any lessons from that, or is that factoring in at all for what you're doing?
Yeah, so when we sort of saw that Cboe had pulled, or CBOE had pulled back from the contract, which we were quite surprised about, or I was. I'm not sure if I will talk in ICE, for ICE, but for me, I was quite surprised. And also that they were so public about it, because generally when exchanges pull back from a contract, we just kind of leave it to trade, and it gets quieter, and then we generally don't pull the contract specifically. For us, I think when we see CME and we see CBO, which would probably be the biggest two competitors for us, when we see how they've launched it as a contract within their greater scheme of contracts. Whereas ICE, we've built backed. And I guess I should explain to a number of people that we have backed as the warehouse and the trust company that is now it's now a trust. It's regulated by the New York Department of Financial Services. Then we have ICE Futures US and ICE Clear US. So we're not just looking at launching a futures contract or multiple futures contracts. For us, it's building the ecosystem around crypto and what we see. So ICE historically, so Jeff Sprecher, our CEO, he started the company in around year 2000. He'd seen a hole in the market at the time with energy contracts where you couldn't get proper pricing, you couldn't get efficiency when you're going to get and trade your energy contracts. So he bought a company called Continental Exchange for $1, and now we're worth $50 billion over time. Lots of acquisitions and things have changed. But what they've seen and what we've seen, and ICE and back to seen, is that there's a hole in this market too. There's a hole for infrastructure, what's institutional grade, so that the institutional guys can come in. And we've also found that banks, hedge funds, all these financial institutions are very slow at getting in because they can't find a way to get in where shareholders are going to be comfortable. So we wanted to build that for them, and not just build a contract, but build a warehouse, a custodian that they're going to be comfortable with using for physical delivery as well.
Okay. What countries are you seeing demand from?
So in Asia, the biggest demand we see is Japan. We see demand from Korea, but there's a lot of regulatory structure there where we can't offer the contract. So regulators prohibit that for us. Hong Kong, we see a lot of demand coming from China, demand coming from Singapore, demand from Australia. And then on the other side, it's the US. Minimal demand, less demand coming from Europe. It's really US and Asia that we've seen most of the demand, and a lot from Brazil, actually.
Interesting. So what opportunities do you think are unique to Asia with this offering?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that one. So Asia, if I look at Hong Kong and I look at a lot of the brokers that are out of Hong Kong, Hong Kong has well over 100 brokers that deal with the retail market there, and they offer this space out to the Chinese, to the Taiwanese, to a number of different North Asian counterparties. We've been speaking to them, and they have a huge amount of demand to be able to trade this contract without people necessarily holding Bitcoin, having to open a wallet. So for them, it's trying to reach out to retail guys who say, I want to have Bitcoin, but I don't want to go physical. And I guess when we're talking about physical delivery, a lot of contracts that have physical delivery don't go physical. So our gas oil contract that's physically delivered, it's maybe 1 or 2% actually goes physical. So a lot of people just trade it to be able to get access to the market. So for here, it's a lot of people getting access without necessarily having to use physical Bitcoin itself. And I see it as a way of growing the pie. So when we're talking to some firms, there's a lot of people that are just trading, they're comfortable trading now, but they're trying to get more and more people to learn about it. Genesis Block in Hong Kong, which some of you may know of, they run Bitcoin 101 courses. And when I've talked to Clement there, he had explained to me once, he said, I find anybody who's over 30 needs to be handheld through the whole thing. So he was just very clear about the age. So anyone who was over 30 had to come in, had to learn about the wallet, they had to bring in their iPad or their iPhone, open a wallet there. Whereas anybody who's younger, they're comfortable enough to figure this out on their own. So I think it's getting more people that are uncomfortable about Bitcoin, that want to have exposure but don't necessarily want to hold Bitcoin. And when I talk to the brokers in Hong Kong, they're trying to figure out a way to give their clients access, but they're not quite sure how. So this gives them an opportunity to do that. Okay.
And just a question slightly on a different topic, but what's your perspective on the lower amount of women in the industry? What do you think can be done to rectify that? What do you see as any issues with it?
So I've sort of was giving in this sort of a thought as well, and actually I was Googling a few things this morning because we had talked about how to deal with this. One of the things that we've seen is I came from the oil markets before, and now I'm doing crypto and oil as well. In oil markets, there's also very few women. We have an annual golf tournament, and I play, and one other woman plays out of 100 people playing. And generally, whether it's crypto or whether it's oil or even a lot of the financial markets, I go to a lunch or I run a lunch and it will be 10 people and there may be 2 women, me and somebody else. And yes, and we always have Rebecca, so I can bring her along whenever I need to have another woman. But there's not a lot. I was speaking with Angelina Kwan from BitMEX probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and she sort of brought this up to me too. And I think BitMEX is trying to do more small mentorship within their organization. I think for women, we have to mentor each other, and whether it's younger women trying, even if it's informal, trying to find maybe older women who can help mentor them on whether it's a career or how to get in there, or whether it's even older women working with younger women who might know more about the industry. I think it's working together and trying to bring more in. And I think for Invest Asia, they've been good at having women on panels, because sometimes you have panels where it is all men. And I was at a futures conference and it was all men on the panel, and they had the question about why aren't there more women in the industry? And I had been asked to be on the panel, and then they had turned me down for a reason, and I thought, well, I could have been up there. So they have a lot of, I think it's trying to figure out how you get more women exposure and making the choice to do that. And I think for me, I have 2 young daughters, so I try to get them to learn a little bit more about the market and the industry as well. So I'm trying to get them to learn about coding. They're 5 and 8, so they don't want to do anything I tell them to at the moment, and probably will for many years to come. But it's trying to get them to understand it, for them to work more in technology. And I think it's for all of us to make sure that either our young daughters are learning as much about it as they can, and as we get older, to make sure that we bring as many women into it as possible.
Okay, nice. So I guess if you can just tell people, like, say people in the audience want to trade the Bitcoin contracts. So how do they do that? What are the logistics? Just like on September 23rd, how can people do this?
Yeah, so if you want to trade on September 23rd, you have to start getting set up now. But for most clients, how I guess we want to break it up is if we look at what we have. So we have Back the Warehouse, we have ICE Futures US and ICE Clear US. So you have to get a brokerage account, either with in Singapore with Phillips, Futures, for example. Let's see, E-Trade in the US should be trading from day one, or EDNF, there will be trading. Wedbush will be offering services, Phillips Capital out of the US. It's working with them to be able to get a clearing account open. So the clear, in a way, protects the clearinghouse. So we don't do the AML KYC directly on the end traders. It's the clearing members that do that. And then it's putting money with the clearers. So we charge margin, just as a lot of the other exchanges do for futures. So you will put some money with your clear to be able to trade that contract. And also, it's also talking to us. We're happy to make any introductions that you need to be able to do that. You then would open an account with the warehouse directly. So if you want to actually go to physical delivery, it would be working with the warehouse to be able to open that account. Then we will do KYC and AML on you as well in that sense. You can put Bitcoin in, or you have the warehouse account, you can go short, and then you can get your Bitcoin at the end of the month when the contract closes.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you very much.
It's been great.